So, joining us today is a visionary leader, philanthropic strategist, and a champion of community empowerment who stepped into the role of executive director of Reach Out and Read Ohio just last summer, Dr. Stephen Lake. At Reach Out, Stephen is leading statewide efforts to promote early literacy and strengthen parent child bonds through pediatric care. I'm excited to hear more about what's happening. Beyond Reach Out, Stephen is also the founder and principal of Vanguard Strategy, a strategic consulting firm that empowers nonprofits and foundations with innovative solutions that amplify their missions and drive sustainable growth. Before joining Vanguard and Reach Out, Stephen served as the founding executive director of Thrive Scholars Northeast Ohio, where he focused on supporting high achieving students of color in their pursuit of higher education and impactful careers. He holds a doctorate in organizational leadership and communication from Northeastern University. He's a certified fundraising executive, and he serves on a variety of boards, including the Near West Intergenerational School, Policy Bridge, and Starting Point. I'm not sure when he sleeps because his days are incredibly full and rich. With that, I invite you, please join me in welcoming Stephen Lake.
Thank you, Becky. I really appreciate the introduction and thanks so much for the invitation. Really excited to talk with everybody about Reach Out and Read Ohio. And again, so Stephen Lake, and as Becky noted, I am the founding executive director of Reach Out and Read Ohio. And so I get a lot of questions, quite a bit about what is Reach Out and Read, and can you tell me a little bit more? So I'm so glad for this opportunity. And so essentially, Reach Out and Read, we're a national organization, and and what I represent is the statewide affiliate of Reach Out and Read Ohio. And essentially what we do, we embed literacy into the routine well child visit, which is the in the pediatric space, right? And so we partner with clinicians and we train clinicians in the Reach Out and Read model so that when they are going about their routine visit with parents and with children, what they're doing in that well visit is they're incorporating a piece of that is going to be focused on literacy and what we call early relational health, right? And so we know that between birth and the age of 5, there are roughly between 13 to 15 well visits that a family is going to be a part of. And we use books as a tool, and our clinicians use books as essentially a developmental surveillance tool in that appointment to, as they're looking at height and weight and fine and motor skills, they're also going to be able to use that book as a literacy gauge as well, right? And so what we're really doing is not just giving away a book, but we're really promoting a relationship building process between the parent and caregiver and the child, and it's a promotion of shared reading. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about just, as we know who we are, but also why does this matter, and why Reach Out and Read works, and really why now, and also is how do folks get involved, and how do folks find a place in this major work that we're doing. And one of the big things that I really like about how we structure our work is that we really stick to this mentality of connection before intervention, right? And so there are many interventions that we put in place in community, but one of the things that what we like to believe is that before we do all of that, we want to make sure that we have this connection established, right? And that connection between the caregiver and the child, and the connection between the clinician and the family, right? There's so much that goes into building that connection, and that trust piece really sets the foundation for success, right? And so when we talk about why this is so important, right, and what we do, it's really important for us to say, this is not just an education issue, right? But this is really a health issue, and it's an economic issue, and it's a workforce issue. We all know as leaders in community that so many things that we're all working to combat, often when you peel it back, many times can kind of come back to the foundational skills, in which we see literacy as one of those big skills, right? And so we know that early relationships really serve as that foundation, and children who have strong bonds with their caregiver, with their parent, are going to be much more inclined to succeed academically. But then also, what we say is those positive childhood experiences begin to mitigate the adverse childhood experiences so many of our young people face, right? And so much of the community-based trauma and the struggles that maybe come with poverty or food insecurity, things of that nature, having strong relationships really begins to put a strong foundation in place for young people to be very resilient in that space. And so one of the words that is big in this country, but not necessarily maybe as big in Cleveland and Ohio, is what we really stand on is early relational health, right? And really what that means is those are the early bonds that are built between parents and children, right? And so when we talk about that, like, what is that? That's the talking, the reading, the singing, and the play. And so we are really a big promoter of that, and we do that through literacy, right? And so the reason why it's so important is um, we know that the gaps that exist in literacy occur much earlier than when a child first goes to school, right? And so we have to start early. And the science is very clear. When we come to think about it, 90% of brain development happens by age 5. And if we don't get those first 5 years right, we miss a lot. And so one of the biggest things that we promote is that we know those first 5 years only happen once, and we're really trying to make the most of them together in partnership with community. Um, Again, a lot of this may right here may not be a surprise to folks because I know we're all very embedded in this space. But when we talk about Ohio's literacy challenge, um, what we know is that the problems that we're seeing are starting very, very early, right? And with more than 60% of Ohio kids not being kindergarten ready and approximately 40% of Ohio third graders not being proficient um, in reading, that just begins to snowball. And when these things are not caught early, the opportunity to catch up becomes that much more difficult. And so what we're trying to do is say, hey, how do we actually start this engagement at birth, right? As soon as that child comes into that first well visit at 3, 4, 5 days, we're already putting a book in their face, and we are engaging them and encouraging that parent or caregiver to really build that strong relationship from the start. One of the challenges that we see in this space, though, is that many of these disparities that we just talked about, they're often exacerbated when we talk about when we kind of overlay that with income and race, right? And so we are very cognizant of that and very focused on making sure that we are very community centered and really centering community in all the work that we do. And because that exists, we know that there's many families that lack books in the home. And so as we really embed ourselves more formally in the early childhood education space and the literacy kind of just broader ecosystem, we know there are many partners in this space, and we want to make sure that we are just doing our part to make sure that all of our families in Ohio and across the country are really being set up for success, and knowing that because what we do is, we are partnering with those clinicians, right, and those clinical partners, and families have often shared, and this is broad research, that in those earlier years, that clinician is often considered one of the most trusted voices in a family's life, right? And so you got that young child at home, and that clinician really becomes that voice of reason to help you navigate those highs and those lows. And when they are prescribing literacy, it's something that we really see that change of behavior taking place, and we start to see many more families, reach out and read. Oftentimes, is the first book that a family takes home, and we start to see that engagement and that routine of reading start to take place because of that small moment that they had with their clinician in the well visit. So it's a really powerful engagement that does take place. So when we when we look at you just reach out and read in and of itself, right? It's a really what I love about it is that it's a really simple solution with a really tremendous impact, right? And so we are we are embedded within a system that already exists, right? There's nothing that we are creating, and there's nothing that we are requiring of our families, right? There's nothing for our families to sign up for, there's nothing extra for them to do. All they need to do is go about their normal routine. They go to their well visit, and because we have such a broad-based clinical partner team across the state, our clinicians are just embedding that right into the routine visit. So it becomes a part of what they see, and it eventually becomes a part of what they expect, right? And because of the power of what we do, it actually begins to change the dynamic of the clinical relationship, right? So we start to see um, families that are part of Reach Out and Read actually have higher um, return rates for more well visits, right? So we start to see this really powerful impact on community. And what's really beautiful about it is that we actually have seen clinician satisfaction increase too, right? And so there's like this win-win-win all across the board from just really implementing this simple intervention within something that already occurs, right? And so our um, our families and our children, they walk away with a new age appropriate, culturally relevant book, and that is at every well visit from birth essentially to 5 years of age. And then we often get the questions, why do you stop at 5? And the reason why we generally stop at 5 is because that's when children ultimately start to go to school, and then we then hope that our partners at the K-12 level eventually begin to kind of pick that up. But it's really setting that foundation for success. And the biggest piece that I want folks to certainly walk away with is that we're definitely it's not just a simple book giveaway program, right? And I think we've all been to those experiences where you maybe go to an appointment and then you walk away and say like, hey, here's a sucker at the end of that appointment, right? And it's not that, right? Our clinicians are leading their appointments with book in hand, and they're coming in and they're saying, is the child grabbing for it? Are they putting it in their mouth? Are they pointing to colors? Are they able to turn the pages? It's all the developmental pieces that are allowing us to see, is that child progressing? And many times that clinician can say, hey, I can really tell that you're doing this at home. And sometimes they may say, hey, we're not doing it enough, right? But what is that routine? Is that a bedtime routine? Is it something you do in the morning? Is it something you do before dinner, right? So we can all have different routines. We all have different life situations. And so what we're saying is it doesn't have to be 20, 30 minutes every day. It could be 2 minutes here, 3 minutes here. But it's about building that confidence as a parent to be able to engage that way, and then that structure as a family to look forward to that. Um, so when we talk about who we are and what we've done, we can also talk a little bit about our impact, right? And so when we look at our 2025 data, again, we are a national organization, right? And we have a huge reach and a huge impact in this country. And so from a national standpoint, last year, we did about 11.2 well child visits across our entire enterprise. Just under 5 million children we supported, and distributed 9 million books. And that is every state across this country. And when we drill that down to Ohio, very similarly, 350,000 well visits, 175,000 children served. We have over 1,000 clinicians in Ohio who are trained in Reach Out and Read, and that is a 90-minute training that they all go through. So it just goes to, we all know clinicians, they're very, very busy folks, but they're very, very passionate, right? And so they're saying, hey, this is a very meaningful thing, and I want to make sure that I'm doing it with a high level of fidelity. So they go through our training. But similarly, we donated just over 300,000 books through our program. So 300,000 plus books just into the hands of Ohio children And again, across all different types of clinical settings, right? Urban, rural, and suburban. So one of the things you will hear us talk about is the Reach Out and Read Ohio launch, right? And so there will be more news about that. But we are formally launching Reach Out and Read Ohio this month in March 2026, at the end of this month. And so you may be saying, well, how do you have all these impact data, but you're about to launch? And so, really, for 20 plus years, Reach Out and Read has been just organically growing all over the country. And actually very fortunate to have one of Reach Out and Read's founders is actually lives in Ohio, right? Dr. Robert Needleman. And so he's a longtime clinician in Ohio, recently retired, and so he's based in Cleveland, right? So we've been fortunate to have one of our founders here, but organically grown, right? And so what does that organic growth look like? That is a clinician saying, "Hey, I heard about this amazing literacy program, this early bonding program, and I want to bring that to my clinic." And they'll figure out a way to drum up a few $1,000s to purchase books, and they'll start the Reach Out and Read program. Doing that over the course of a couple of decades put us at over 200 Reach Out and Read sites, right? And so what we knew as a national organization is to grow in a sense of strategic growth, but with fidelity. We needed an umbrella structure over all of that work so that what is happening in Cincinnati matches what happens in Toledo, which happens in Cleveland, and in Appalachia as well, right? And so we need to make sure that strategic alignment is there, and it's really a bringing together of our resources, our capacities in one voice across the entire state. And so we created Reach Out and Read Ohio. I came on as our inaugural leader for that state. And so we're building a team, and we currently have a team of 4 with program managers across the state. We're building a board of advisors, as well as a state and regional medical director role as well too, right? And so we have a medical leader on our team, as well as myself as kind of the nonprofit operations leader on the team. So really, where are we going, right? And so our goal in Ohio, we right now we have roughly about a 25% saturation in Ohio, and our goal is to ensure that we are in all corners of the state, and we are reaching every child 0 to 5. And that is a national goal of ours, but we do that essentially state by state. And one of the beautiful things that I really have admired about what is possible through Reach Out and Read is that because of us being able to leverage an existing system and we don't have to create a new system, is that we practically have universal reach if we were embedded in enough places. And so when you think about the potential impact of a nonprofit, to say we can pretty much reach 100% of our target audience, is pretty remarkable, right? And so we know that if we put the right structures in place and have the right funding aligned, we could theoretically reach all children, with a clinician at the in the front of that, really kind of saying, hey, this is how you build these bonds, and this is how you embed literacy into your daily routine. um, but we know that we want to make sure that we are reaching the highest need communities, right? And so we're looking at families who really need this support as a true priority. But we definitely want to make sure that we're servicing all children. And again, this is really a partnership across sectors, right? And the opportunity to break down some of these silos, right? How often does education and healthcare often come together, right? And so, that's one of the awesome things that I really love about our clinicians, right? They're like, hey, I'm really, really intelligent and I know my stuff, but we're not educators, right? And if we can really kind of come together and you can help us understand how to embed this literacy piece more effectively in our practice, that would be amazing, right? And so we have this really awesome kind of alignment there. So it works really well. Um, and ultimately, right, what is that growth? It's really about building a literacy ready generation, right? And, whether we're talking about STEM or we're talking about AI or whatever the future careers will be, um, the foundation of that is literacy, right? And so, as I often like to say, is this is not just about books, and it's really about relationships, and it's not just about literacy, but it's about brain development, and it's really not just about a program, but if we're really going to change lives, we have to think about how do we change systems, right? And so that's what gets me excited about the work, and it's I'm not just trying to push reach out and read, but like how do we really change the dynamic of our communities one at a time so we can really see these needles move. um and so what does it mean for Ohio? What does it mean for Cleveland, right? And when we really truly think about this, and I've worked in workforce readiness, I've worked in higher ed, I've worked in all these different spaces, right? And early literacy truly means workforce readiness, right? And when we have workforce conversations, if we're not marrying these conversations together, right, this is why I think there's often so many different, breakdowns in some of the things that we do as a community. And so this is really important that we think about it in this very, this kind of longitudinal way, right? And what is the value of having early relationships? It builds strong families, and strong families it builds strong neighborhoods. And so when we start to bring all of those pieces together, right, it really, to me, it sets the foundation for amazing partnerships and an amazing collaboration to really change something that all of us, leaders in the nonprofit, for-profit sector, want to see and want to see take place. And I know I'm running out of time, and I will wrap up very quickly. And so often folks say, how can we get involved, or how do we support something like this? Or I've never heard of this, and how do we engage? And so we often have companies or different folks say, we could host a book drive, or we could do something like that, or maybe fund books, which is one of the primary cost of the work that we do, which is not a huge cost. We have national relationships with major book vendors, and we can get some amazing books at very cheap prices. But like sponsor a clinic, or just connect partners to us, or connect families to us. There's so many ways to do it, and and of course there's other things too. But you can always reach out to me. But these are some of the key things, right? And we're actually hosting a book drive right now. But I did have a flyer, just like one we did over the holidays. Many of you probably have seen this. We partner with Barnes and Noble all across the state of Ohio, and every holiday, right, they do a holiday book drive, and we were their partner this past holiday season. And so when folks went in to buy their gifts, they said, "Hey, we could buy a book for a child," and a few thousand books were donated to Reach Out and Read Ohio through just the Barnes and Noble partnership, right? And so that's just an example of like a corporate entity partnering with us to just make positive community change, in our across our entire state. But that's me. I know I know there's a few minutes for questions, and happy to answer anything that comes through.
Great, fabulous, Stephen. Yeah, we've got about 5 minutes, so let me just jump right into questions. So I'd love to start with the question of partnerships. So I first learned about Reach Out and Read actually 20 plus years ago. My mother was a lifelong pediatrician and past president of the Ohio chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and she secured the first grant that brought Reach Out and Read from Boston to Ohio. And it started very organically, as you already described. And now 20 years later, to see this statewide effort is tremendous, tremendous. So talk to us a little bit about partners. You've mentioned it a few times. Are you partnering with other organizations in the literacy space? Clearly the clinicians and the medical arena, but what about the literacy community? There are a lot of literacy organizations in this state and locally. What does partnership with them look like?
Yes, no, it's a great question, and absolutely, and it's really it's an important thing for our community, right? And so there are some really important players in this space. For instance, like the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, right? That's a really dynamic partner for us. And so the way we like to describe it is that Reach Out and Read is kind of like the vaccine, And Dolly Parton Imagination Library is like the booster, right? We get in there and then we show the family how to do it and how to read and engage. And then the Dolly Parton program provides that ongoing books that come home over time. And it's important for us as a community and as partners in that ecosystem to work together, right? But also with the school districts, right? And their work is easier when we can work with more children and they're more prepared for preschool or more prepared for kindergarten, right? And so it's very broad based, but we're doing a much more focused effort on bringing our awareness outside of the clinical walls, so that more partners know that we exist and how they can partner with us.
So you mentioned you have about 25% saturation across Ohio, and I don't know if that's saturation in communities or actual families served. So could you clarify that 25%? And what are you looking for in terms of, I assume you're recruiting new physicians, new clinicians to step into this program. So what does recruitment look like and how is it being received by clinicians?
Yeah, so that in terms of saturation, that is basically family served, right? And so we're pretty well established in like Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, as well as Toledo, our urban cores. But still, there's a lot of opportunity within that, right? And so we have large health system partners, we have a lot of federally qualified health center partners, but there's so much more in between, and particularly in Appalachia as well, too, right? We know we need to strategically grow. In terms of how the partnership development works, it's not a hard sell, right? When we go in front of a clinician and talk about what we do, um, they're fully on it, right? And so really what we try to do, and really part of what we're working with as a statewide entity, is how do we build in the funding mechanisms to financially support this, because not all healthcare systems are made the same and not all of them have the financial capacity to maybe support their own books. And so it's the collaboration of working together to say, we know you want to do this, but how do we find the funding stream, the sustained funding streams, to make sure that you can do it for years over year over year? And so that's really where a lot of the partnership conversation comes in. But they're all, it's not a hard sell once they hear about it.
So, given the unique position that the clinician's office provides and this trust that you've talked about that really builds a relationship, you're really in a unique position to be able to track families and to track outcomes. So, what does long-term assessment look like in terms of whether this is really moving the needle on the dial and whether families that stay connected and engaged through their pediatricians and reach out, whether it's really making a difference?
Yes, and so one of the things about Reach Out and Read is we have a lot of data, and we have about 20 plus kind of peer reviewed studies on Reach Out and Read. And some of the things, the high level things that we know, right, that families that participate in Reach Out and Read are 2.5 more times likely to read at home once they kind of go through this experience, right? And so that's a game changer. And where we continue to kind of track is, and it's working through partnerships, right? Do we see more children and more families choosing high quality preschools? Do we see more children and families entering kindergarten ready? What are we seeing in terms of third grade reading, particularly as we think about, the state of Ohio? And so those are the things that we're continuing to track. But then at a family level, and we do plan to work with more clinics across the state, is how do we begin to track from the parental side, right? And what feedback are they giving us about the experience and about the program? It's one of those things where there are laws in place where we don't necessarily always can't get all of the personally identifiable information on families, but we do have some really great studies and ideas where we can begin to follow maybe certain families and really kind of track their growth and development. But it's really looking at those key measures that we already have outlined already, right? And we have so many partners working on it. And again, we know that we're a major component in that puzzle. We're not the only piece in that puzzle, but we're a major foundational piece. But we're very cognizant of that tracking, and we really want to see Reach Out and Read families ultimately see tremendous success.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're running short on time. I'm going to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
And by the way, there are a bunch of questions in the chat. I'd love to make some connections between the folks that are
Okay.
interested in
Sure.
getting connected. So, final question. So, as we think about policy, right, and are there policy changes at the state or local level that you think would really help us progress faster in early literacy and health equity?
Yeah, yes. And one of the big things that we've been talking about recently is about like this just like the science of reading, right? And so when we're thinking about the changes that are coming with that, there's definitely seeming to be more focus and attention on literacy. And but the way we maybe prioritize it and ensure that more families are able to take a advantage of it and track it long term, right? One of the biggest things that we also see in terms of is adult literacy, and that has a big impact on childhood literacy, right? And so that's something that we know, right? And it's one of those things where we often get, well, if a parent can't read, well, how do they read to their child, right? And so we have some ways that we can work with families on that, but it's not the only solution. So it becomes a collective action effort, right? And so we need to work together so that when we have a city where I think in Cleveland, right, we maybe have like 60 to 70% functionally illiteracy rates, right? And so how do we work together to make sure that all of those families can also engage? But there's policy implications that need to be at play to make sure that that happens. And funding, obviously, is a big piece of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Stephen, we could clearly talk for hours about
right.
this topic because there's so much to it. What I would love to do is we're going to send a follow-up email to everyone
Okay.
who participated in today's conversation. We'll share your contact information. I know there's several that are already connected to you. There are some more that are chomping at the bit. We will make that happen, but let me invite the entire audience at this stage. Please join me in thanking Stephen for stepping inside our leader lunch break today. It was just a fabulous conversation. And as I mentioned earlier, I've got a real personal connection to this. So I'm excited to see the relaunch of the statewide effort in a more coordinated, intentional way as part of a national. So congratulations, Stephen.